But one thing I didn't ask you that I'd love to know is how difficult it was for you in that moment to be impartial. This is a good friend of yours. This is a man that you love and call a colleague, and here he is trying to make history at 45 years young. And obviously the call it happened reverts back to a conversation, a personal conversation that you guys had as far as him telling you how he thought the fight was going to go. But was it tough for you to call his fights given how close you had become?
Um, I'll be honest and tell you that at that particular moment in time, with apologies to Michael Moore, I wasn't trying to be impartial. I knew what the boxing audience would most want to see. Moore was not an outgoing personality. He did not seek adulation from the fans. Um, so it wasn't really a betrayal of Michael for me to celebrate George in that moment. The world was going to celebrate George in that moment. And that was, forgive me, Michael, that was a knockout victory for the whole sport. That was really a moment that elevated boxing because, on a personal level, it was exactly what fans would most have wanted to see, and most of them thought they had no chance of seeing that. So for him to deliver that in that moment, and that's part of the genesis of it happened. But of course, the real genesis of it happened is that he had told me, he had said to me on at least two occasions, you watch. There will come a moment late in the fight when he'll come and stand in front of me and let me knock him out. Always the same words. He didn't change those words. He'll come and stand in front of me and let me knock him out. And to this day, every time I look at it, I marvel, thinking to myself, how did he know? What was it in him that convinced him that he could manipulate Moore in the way that he did? And Moore, I believe, probably to this day, I like Michael. Probably to this day, Michael would say, oh no, it wasn't that kind of psychology. He didn't manipulate me. That was an accident. He got lucky. I believe that's probably what Michael would say to this day. But that's not what I believe. Because based on what everything I got from George in the lead up to the fight, he had a plan. He wouldn't tell me what the plan was, but he had a plan. And I'm pretty sure, based on what I saw in his face after the fight, that what had happened was he executed the plan and achieved what he thought he could achieve.
One of the amazing details about that fight is that he wore the same trunks in that fight against Michael Moore that he did against Muhammad Ali 20 years prior in 1974 in Zaire. Did he tell you he was going to do that beforehand?
I don't recall whether he told us. I do recall that before the first round began, before round one began, when he took off the robe, we realized he was wearing, probably Ross Greenberg in the truck saw it, probably Mark Payton, our director, saw it. Somebody might have seen it, but the bottom line was, yes, he was wearing the orange trunks from 20 years before in Zaire. And oh, by the way, they were a little tattered. They had some worn spots in them and stuff. I don't know where they had been, but yes, he wore the trunks from Zaire, and he memorized the lyrics to "The Impossible Dream."
Wow.
And he came to the ring singing "The Impossible Dream," and he made it happen. It's one of the most uncanny things I've ever seen in a sports event, and certainly the most uncanny thing I ever saw in a boxing match.
I love the moment when he realizes the fight is over. He looks up at the sky. Now here's this guy who is, kind of born again and a man of God. And he just looks up to the sky and he gets down on his knees and he starts praying. It's a beautiful moment. Go ahead.
He looks up at the sky and he runs across the ring, runs to the far corner, and gets down on his knees in supplication to his Lord. And it was as beautiful as anything I've ever seen.
Do you feel confident in saying, and I'm sorry for opening these wounds, Jim, and I appreciate it, and we won't keep you very long.
Crying because George is dead. That's all.
Okay. No, I understand. Do you, we know about how much the Ali loss hurt him, and we've heard the stories of him, going to Paris and staying in a hotel room for 2 weeks and almost being ashamed or feeling ashamed of coming back home. Do you think that the wound fully closed on that night? Do you think he was able to finally get over that it took 20 years for him to get over that loss?
Well, let's put it this way. I know that he didn't take that to his grave. All right. I know
That's good.
that he offloaded any negativity with regard to Ali, and that by the time of George's passing, probably even by the time of Ali's passing in 2016, they were friends, and they were close enough friends that George regarded him as a confidant. And George told me that he had secret, private, late night conversations with Ali. And at one point, I asked him, when he discussed that with me, at one point I asked him, I said, "So have you talked about religion with Ali?" And George said, "Why would you ask me that?" I said, "Well, George, he's a practicing Muslim and you are a Pentecostal minister with his own church. There seems to be a big gap there." And he said, "You've heard about W and Obama having late night, midnight conversations with each other because they share something that nobody else shares." I said, "Yeah, I've read that. I've heard those stories." He said, "Well, we're the same. He calls me at midnight. I call him at midnight. We talk about lots of things unrelated to boxing. And at the end of the day, with regard to your question, the answer is that we decided, Ali and I decided, good is good and bad is bad, and any morally conscious person knows the difference. And on that basis, we found common ground between Islam and Christianity."
Wow. Um, I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but I'm just wondering because a funny kind of favorite story of mine regarding Foreman's career is that he only fought once in 1975, and it was in Toronto at Maple Leaf Gardens against five men. And it was on ABC, and Kosel and Ali were calling it, and Ali was kind of trolling him. There's the poster, Foreman versus five. And I love this because it's so kind of off the wall, it's unique, and that was his only appearance post Ali in the following year, 1975, and in an era where people kind of scoff at the sort of influencer boxing, freak show boxing, like you remember that this stuff was kind of going on all the time, dating back to the days of bare knuckle boxing. And so I'm wondering, did you ever talk to him about this decision, why he ended up fighting just once in 75 and against five men in Toronto of all places?
No, I never talked to him about that. And maybe one reason I didn't talk to him about that is that I, cut my teeth and began my career working for Rune Arledge at ABC Sports. And I knew that Rune Arledge was a fan and a devotee of the self-created event, that he foresaw that sports television networks like ABC Sports were going to participate in the proliferation and development of new events that would take new competition forms. And Foreman versus five, just like Ali versus, who was it, Rocky Aoki?
Antonio.
Yeah, those things were in partnership with ABC, and probably partially stimulated by Arledge's fondness for new sporting frontiers.
How do you want him to be remembered? When people say George Foreman, who was George Foreman? How do you want people to remember this man?
Uh, a giant, one of the five greatest heavyweight champions of all time. Um, the man who authored one of the most unpredictable and thrilling upsets in the history of the sport, and gave me involuntarily, inadvertently, gave me the platform that became the title for my book.
Mm.
And I will never be able to forget that he died at this moment, just when the book is getting ready to come out. I mean, it's not my story, it's his story, but the degree to which we are now connected at this moment, with a title that's about him and a prologue that's about him, and, all the other elements of the book that relate directly to him. It's stunning to me, and it makes me love him even more, and miss him even more.
I am sure that you will be thinking about him on May 2nd when you return to the airwaves as far as a boxing blow by blow man. It's such a great story. It's we've talked now a few times about your desire to return, and it was so great to see that you will in fact be returning. So I want to congratulate you on this incredible piece of news, and ask you also: is this what can you tell us about this? Is it a one
Tell
shot?
you that all my beloved expert commentator partners, George Foreman, Manuel Stewart, Roy Jones, Larry Merchant, Max Kellerman, there are others. They will all be there with me in Times Square because I owe so much to all these people who taught me how to be a boxing blow by blow person. And every one of those people played a role. And by the way, they became my closest friends on the planet. If you were to ask me who is the closer friend, Roy, Emmanuel, or George, that's a pretty close call.
Mm.
And each one of the three could state a case. So it's a huge part of my life. It's stunning how graphically meaningful it is at this particular moment in time. And it's, among other things, it's the universe telling me your book tells a story that people want to hear.